everyone. We can get the last few stragglers take their seats and calm down. We're going to get started. We have Soft-Grid Utility Executive Forum. We're going to be discussing some of the efforts by some of the leading utilities in the space. We're joined today by Jason Hanley, Director of Smart Grid Technology and Operations with Duke Energy's Emerging Technology Office. Nick Hauschka, Director of Strategy for Station A, the similar Emerging Technology Office with NRG. And we have Frankie McDermott, Chief Customer Officer with SMUD. So basically what we'll be going through is a little bit of the kind of road mapping, how these utilities and utility groups are looking at analytics and what kind of the strategy moving forward over the next 5 years or so will be. So just to start out as a little baseline, looking back over the last 2 or 3 years, what are some of the 1 or 2 most important or most valuable use cases that you guys have implemented that just you didn't have either access to the data or the ability to bring it into one place? So I don't know if, Jason, you want to start out?
I think one of the most important use cases can we start a little higher? Maybe really talking a little bit about what we've learned from looking at analytics in the past is that, number one, we found out we didn't know as much as we thought we did about our customer and how our system is actually operating. And number two, our customer has a whole lot more information and knows a lot more about their systems than we even thought they did. So for some of the use cases that we're looking at, some of the things that we've done are we've created a data mining analytics initiative. And through that, we found out that some of the most important, or what we perceive were the most important use cases, mostly around metering strategies and customer strategies, were only that way because we had the most data about those. So what we actually have found is that some of our more important use cases we have less and less data on. So that's one thing that we're struggling with right now.
Definitely going to come back to that. Okay. Nick?
I'd say, so 2 big areas where we do a lot of analytics, a lot of data. One is in the retail business and the other in the commercial operations and trading. Those all have a long history of doing data and analytics, and it's only gotten more and more important over time. I think in the last 2 years, really, there's been a huge push into analytics on the retail side, and I think the most interesting lesson learned for me is that how much you can know from things that you already know, just from kind of backing into answers and creating, really using data to create more data to create more data. So it's building out the logic and the learning and what you can do once you know more things. So, and that's been invaluable in the retail business to be able to really understand customers better, what they want, and what we can do for them by building data upon data upon data. So.
Frankie?
I think for me to go to a specific use case, I mean, generally speaking, our customers don't really care what we're doing. You know, somebody mentioned earlier the product is only really thought about 6 to 9 minutes a year. So the first use case that was really concrete was really on theft, on revenue protection. And that's realized 3x to 4x what we were getting before. So that's a very tangible return that is, quite frankly, on the retail customer side, is hard to always monetize. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you giving customer choice? Why are you giving channel options? And to compete for capital dollars for that with something that's much more concrete, it's been difficult. But in our case, it's a very customer-focused company, so it's worked out. But I think analytics, we'll probably get into this more generally. But for us, that's the most concrete use case. But we have lots of irons in the fire right now.
Yep. So you got a little ahead of me, Jason, on the backing out. I just wanted to jump in. But when it comes down to actually addressing as a whole, you mentioned you guys start out with looking at a lot of use cases and kind of drilling down and seeing where the value might be. When it comes down to addressing the actual topic and figuring out how to go about that, is that something that, what's the structure of that group look like for you guys? How does that process develop?
Well, over the past 2-3 years, what we found out is we were very fragmented. Everybody was utilizing point solutions to come up with a solution that would fit their need. And luckily, our IT group pulled together what we call an analytics leadership team. And so it's a cross-cutting functional team throughout all the business that brings together the leaders from different silos and really allows us to focus on what are Duke Energy's biggest priorities for solving as far as use cases go in terms of analytics.
And does that cut across, just give a little bit of background for those of you who aren't familiar with these organizations. SMUD is a municipal utility that addresses T&D and retail operations within Sacramento, and it also has, I believe, some generation as well.
Yeah, we're completely vertically integrated.
NRG operates as an IPP and a retail operator. And then Duke has territories in 8 states now?
6 states.
6 states. Yeah. 6 states.
Wow, what have you heard?
Well, it's 8.
Oh, okay.
I still think it's 8 subsidiaries.
We are basically 8 separate utilities underneath one umbrella as Duke Energy.
So that brings up a second follow-on question for you specifically. That analytics team, where is it sitting in relation to those 8 different groups? Is it up top? Is it individually?
Yeah. The analytics team is led through our corporate IT folks, but the people that comprise the ALT are from corporate generation, transmission, distribution, customer service, operational technologies, all the different groups that have reach back into the businesses in the diverse locations.
Okay. And so Nick, kind of similar to the first question, not the second, but similarly, how are you guys looking at that from, obviously IPP, the needs at the IPP level are very different than the needs involving customer churn and customer segmentation.
So most of our data is in the business. We have corporate IT, but a lot of the data and the analytics is really contained in the business. I'd say coordination is definitely happening and ongoing, but yeah, it's pretty siloed within the business, and we are doing a lot of point solution testing, but where we definitely get a lot of value out of sharing across. So we're not necessarily trying to pull that activity out of the business because it's valuable there, and they know what they do better than anybody else. And so we haven't really made an effort to extract it out. It's largely it's there and it's staying there. But what we are extracting out is best practices, suppliers, who's providing a lot of value, and how can we sort of create a new interpretation of that or create a similar version of that in other parts of the business and leverage the capabilities and the people and the know-how
So essentially,
in different areas.
coordinating the groups, but not necessarily guiding the groups.
Correct.
Yeah. And Frankie, you have kind of, I guess, maybe the simplest way because everybody's in the same office, but.
One would think so. Yeah, I wouldn't, that's nice, but I wouldn't say that. I think we're going towards, I think, if you go backwards for SMUD, not to give you a full history lesson, but, regular utility, then smart grid, smart meters, fully deployed with 40 different projects under smart grid, everything from pricing to DA on the distribution side. It started to make the company need to work together, and then you get to demand response and DG and the need to work in a matrix fashion and how to price DR all the way back to trading, needs analytics on that, needs collaboration. So it's driven changes in the organization. The executive conversation is around data governance right now and who gets to decide. I'm actually fairly familiar with the Duke, what Duke has done. Not completely familiar, but I spoke to another gentleman from Duke. I can't recall his name right now, but I'm very intrigued by that. We've had discussions on the role of IT. I think the conclusion most of the CIOs I was around, and I'm not a CIO, at a meeting in Dallas a month ago was that IT, if IT doesn't provide a solution, the business will do it anyway, and therefore you'll get point solutions. And everybody will have analysts, and everybody will fight for the same staff, and then somebody will create a position somewhere else and steal from each other. So I think it's really, really important that that's figured out, not just in a utility, but in any company. Sure. And we're worried about the supply of data scientists. They can earn a lot more money than some of the famous companies down here, and we're not very sexy in a utility. But the opportunities across the organization are phenomenal. What we're seeing on the initiatives we have on the grid side, on the grid analytics, to the customer side, and there's a real appreciation now across the company. And the umbrella initiative for us is our customer experience excellence, which sounds like it's just customer focused, but there's a sub-team under that on customer business intelligence, and we interviewed 220 people within SMUD. There's only 2,000 there, but there were 220 people that had disparate data needs, and starting to pull that together. And we're just getting there where maybe Duke has already passed us on how to manage that, what's the framework, because I know you guys are doing stuff with local universities and feeding your your process with people as well. So you've looked at the human side and the process side as well. So for us, it's a core issue of the executive team right now, and we haven't figured it out yet business is running at the same time. So we're trying to figure out through our capital investments not to duplicate efforts, but use the same data. And then not everything's driven by the meter anyway. So solutions to customers aren't on, they're plug loads, they're beyond the meter. So thinking how that will all work too.
So that one question I do want to get into, and data governance may not be the exact term, but when it comes down to sharing data between groups, when it comes down to, you said the meter is essentially the center of the universe right now for you guys, but there are a lot of devices out there that can generate vast amounts of data. And if you would ask me a year ago, would there any use to most of that, I would say no. Most of the conversations I've had when you're talking about substation data or data from distribution equipment or status data from potentially a very small generator, you just leave it at the spot and don't utilize it. But it seems like there's been a slow move towards utilizing that more and potentially crunching that with data from a customer service group. How is that data sharing working for you guys? How is the discussions for how to bring and when to bring that together kind of happening today? Nice wide question.
Yeah.
I don't know who would like to start.
Well, I'll start from the standpoint of we do have a data hub. We try to bring a lot of data together, but we have 61 separate OSI Pi servers. So, that's a tremendous amount of data to try to pull together in one place. And my philosophy really is, why do we need to do that? So leave the data in its system of record until you come up with a business use case to bring it somewhere else. So if you can combine that use case, then it makes sense to move the data. But if you can't, and there's no financial or business need or customer contact need to be able to do it, leave it alone. Because otherwise what you end up doing is you move everything into one place and have a huge repository, and you hope someone in your organization will use it at some point.
Yeah, we have some issues with duplication and everything from compliance on the grid side, making sure assets are actually meeting standards, to all the way to the customer side. We're planning to move to time of use within about 3 to 4 years. We're a 2-tiered system right now, and we're going to 1 tier, transitioning over the next few years. Just using all of, and then one specific need within that, electric vehicles. You have one part of the company, mainly the retail side, going, this is the greatest revenue bump we can get in a long, long time without just general growth, while at the same time you may be losing money through distributed generation. And then you have on the distribution side people saying, yeah, but the transformers will blow. It's kind of funny in a company to have, well, we're worried about the asset. No, you shouldn't worry about the asset. You should figure it out through analytics that you're ahead of that. So that's a challenge, but we're on top of it. And I think there's a real alignment behind electric vehicles, especially in California, are a real possibility for us. But predicting them, getting in front of that, is really, again, this whole matrix thing across the company, and the governance, and who gets to decide. We have all this passion around different issues, whether it's DR, DG, EVs, but we often struggle with who's leading, who's on first, So we have to figure that out. For us, that's a big deal. The duplication of data, if somebody's using something for the grid side, some geospatial issue using meter data, then meter data for the customer to present a bill, and then meter data to be used to present, some people were up here earlier, on energy tools online. How accurate does it really have to be? So we're going to it has to be accurate for the bill, but for a lot of the other applications, I don't think it has to be. If you're presenting energy analysis to a customer, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have estimated all the taxes and all the surcharges when you're forecasting energy usage for a customer. So we're getting our heads around that, and the old utility way would be fairly risk averse. I can't present it there in case that one call out of 1.3 million that come in really wants it to be accurate. We're getting around that, and that will increase speed, because speed's an issue. Speed to market with some of these things is an issue for us. So
when you say speed to market, you mean integration and getting the solution up, or are you talking, coordinating it, determine the business case? Like, how wide is that process when you say that?
It's kind of all of the above. You have this idea, or you have a driver from a customer need, you've done some research, or you see it within the industry. I need to provide choice here, or I need to provide energy tools, or the bill needs to look differently, to actually get that into production with all of these things you're talking about, the governance of the data, the privacy of the information, and partnering with a third company. I don't think our cycle is fast enough right now. We could learn a lot down here in the Bay Area, right? So that's one thing that we could benefit from other industries teaching us that process to bring solutions to market much faster. And to be blunt, we have the luxury at the moment, it may not stay there, that our customers, and I mean this in a good way, can't go anywhere. SMUD's a pretty good proposition. That's my one commercial. It's low rates and high reliability, but everybody says that. But in lowest in California, or nearly. So we're not under pressure the customers would go, yet there's a small percentage of them know more about choice than the majority. So we think that'll expand and put pressure on us, but we think we're well ahead of it at the moment.
So it's very interesting when you talk about the speed to market and kind of comfortability of getting solutions going and how to go about that. The maturity of the analytics, the maturity of those internally getting those services out, I guess the best way to put it. What are the pain points that are kind of slowing that down? What's the work, like if you had to name one or two that were really hitting you hard? I'm gonna let Nick start out because I'm just gonna pick on him a little bit. Right now, what are the two things, if you talk to the vendor community, that you could say, I want to get solutions out to my customers, you're slowing me down and not getting me to where I need to be? What would they be?
I think they're distinct if you're looking at backward-looking analysis versus real-time analysis. If you're trying to, build a business where you're tracking data in real time and responding and adjusting, that's a heck of a lot harder than doing a backward look, pulling some data, doing a backward looking analysis and say, hey, we ought to go here. And those are, to me, are two very, very distinctly different problems. And so on the backward looking stuff, I think we're pretty good at that today. But that's not as scalable of a solution as something that's real time, forward looking. In that case, it's doing A/B testing, it's more of getting the process in place. I don't see any real gaps in the vendor community in terms of the tool sets. It's more just about getting the process in place to be able to to run it well and getting the right people doing the right things and the right skill sets. So I'd say more than anything, it's actually a skill, getting the right capabilities on the team to put that process in place and then to run it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have an opinion on this. One thing internally that I think you're basically asking about barriers to that speed. Internally, it's just the integrity of the data. We want to do a lot of things, but somebody mentioned earlier in another session, you only have 30% of the customers' emails. The accuracy of the information, you have a restaurant that has 5 meters to that restaurant, it's one business. Just getting around that data integrity, I think that's the internal issue. I don't personally, and anybody can call me if they want to, if they know somebody that can help us with data integrity and actually fix that. I think that's going to take some hard slogging work. And then the other part, at the risk of getting tomatoes thrown at me, I think in this, especially on the customer retail side, there's a lot of vendors that are promising a lot, and it's like an emerging market. There's not an awful lot proven, so who do you want to jump in with? And we kind of joke about it. There's a lot of vendors want you to marry them, and we're just looking for a date, We want to try things out. So I'm not picking on the vendors that they're all over-promising. That would be an easy way to cop out. I just think that for utilities, that most of them have enterprise systems. Most of them are focused on keeping the lights on and presenting a bill. And this is all additional that we think the customers really need. The solutions we get I think they have to be in series rather than parallel. Don't do everything at once. Don't promise everything at once. Or don't tell me I have to do another SAP or another Oracle or another PeopleSoft or something. Because it is so emerging. So I think the vendors that crack the code on that, hooking you in early with a success, not hooking you in with a massive system and then you're tied to it and then maybe it doesn't. Because I don't know if any of us are smart enough to have thought out everything that we need yet. So that's to us in SMUD, that's a barrier. Looking for solutions that we don't have to invest an enormous amount in to find out whether we want the first. We would rather probably go this piece than this piece. Have a roadmap, have a vision, but I know that's probably hard for the vendors to get, but that's what we need.
Well, answer it in a little bit different way. I mean, if you take a look at where the data comes from, the source of the data, most of our data is field data. So our biggest issue right now is we're working on a layered intelligence platform where we're going out and ensuring interoperability of devices. So most devices today and software systems have some sort of proprietary nature to them, and they don't interoperate well with each other. We believe this is a big barrier for us to actually gain tremendous value out of our system. So we're trying to break down the silos between the logical, physical, and network layers of our devices to where we can actually do distributed analytics at the edge, solve local problems locally, not have to bring everything back to a consolidated big data hub system, and not have the latency, the transport, and again, speed to solution. So we believe that interoperability of devices is really the key, not only for more cost-effective solutions for us moving forward, but also for being able to provide better predictive analytics, distributed analytics, and just better overall operational and customer satisfaction.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think standards are super important. We can't have every utility doing its own data architecture all the way down to the grid edge and have its own data requirements for what devices need to report. I think standards bodies are going to be of utmost importance to be able to extract any value out of all this information.
And let me caveat what Nick said, just one thing, because it's a little bit of a tickler for me, is we all agree that open standards are good, but having open standards does not mean you're interoperable. So you need everyone adopts C12 for their meter, but I can't replace a Nitron meter with a Siemens meter or a Schweitzer or a LNG meter right now. Everybody has their own secret sauce. So, we all agree open standards are great, but just because someone says they got an open standard or they're standards-based does not mean you're interoperable.
I think there were quite a few ARA projects that came out with very similar findings with some of the newer protocols involving substation automation. So definitely a problem ongoing. One thing I did want to touch on is data access. So I believe you guys have a couple unregulated markets that you work in. This wouldn't necessarily apply to you, Frankie. When it comes out to data access for information around distributed energy resource deployment, for information around, I know one thing I've talked to some of your colleagues with in the past is issues with concerns about black start for solar, understanding what's actually happening from a solar panel. Ongoing, are there constraints, are there things that regulators can help with to enable IPPs, to enable integrated providers and providers in unregulated markets, for that matter, to have a better understanding of data that's outside of their purview that is critical to operations? If you have 200 solar panels on a feeder and you don't have information regarding what's the output of those solar panels, I would imagine that would be up the top of any utility's list of concerns, right?
Sure.
So are there any efforts or things that you think regulators might be able to help you guys, help your utilities out with to enable that data sharing?
Yes, there are. But you have to understand what the appetite of the regulator is right now. And for us, we've gone through a big merger recently. We've had some environmental issues recently. So we have to be very cognizant of what we go before the regulator and ask for at this point. Do we believe there's value there? Absolutely. But are there potentially other ways of getting some of the same types of information? Yes. We're working right now with University of North Carolina at Charlotte and on algorithms that will allow us to actually, through smart inverters, actually curtail the inverter, actually be able to have the ability to adjust the VAR output, the voltage output, and play back into the frequency regulation market. So it's not necessarily that we have to go down the regulatory path. We will at some point, but we can still do other things today with the advent of new technologies, especially around smart inverters, to where we can do more than what we're doing. And that's what we're trying to push right now.
Okay. I don't know if, Nick, you want to respond as well?
For me, this one still sits in kind of the unsolved mystery camp. I don't know that we would love direction. I think we have. It's not totally clear how. I mean, I think we're going to watch what's going on in New York. I think there's a lot of really interesting and valid ideas coming out of there. Guidance is really critical, but at the same time, we don't want to inhibit technology from from discovering new ways to do things. And we know there's value there. I think at this point there's still a lot of proving that needs to be done on the technology side to show value, and I think the path will become clearer on the regulatory front once more technologies are proven out.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it definitely seems like something that there are regions, there are areas that matter. Obviously, Hawaii is one that it does definitely matter.
Yeah.
But it's an ongoing question in most areas of the U.S.
And there's a philosophical element to this too, as to where you stand on this. You know, is there ever going to be a very top-down system that can process all the information and figure out the exact optimal way to dispatch all the resources? Yes, to me, in theory, that's probably the most efficient way to do it from a very theoretical standpoint. But it's hard to imagine that actually working in the real world. And we may need to find other ways to provide shortcuts and rules that make it easier for companies to innovate and provide solutions according to those rules and standards.
Yeah. All right, so we have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to open up to audience Q&A if we have any. I think we may have some runners up there. Oh, we got one right in the middle.
Yes, hi, Kevin Lucas from Maryland Energy Administration. Quick question on the stuff you're talking about and moving more towards the real-time analytics and trying to get some additional value out of that space. But a lot of the customers in a lot of places, they don't have any exposure to real-time prices. You know, in Maryland, our SOS procurement happens, every 6 months for a 2-year contract. So it's very slow, and a lot of the commercial and industrial contracts are more on a 2 to 3 year basis where prices are locked in. So I know there's a lot of discussion also about rate reform, but how important it is to have the real-time analytics in place before there's an opportunity for customers to really actually earn some investments and some return from that?
I think that real-time analytics are important today from the standpoint of operational analytics, because everything we do is going to be at some point the customer will more than likely end up paying for. So I'll give you an example. We run a smart generation analytics program right now where we're outfitting our generators, our turbines, with all kind of sensors. And we've already found 2 big problems. We got initially notified of a turbine fan blade that had a bad vibration on it. It was going to crack and go through and cause about 6 months worth of repairs. All of those costs would have been passed through the customer if we couldn't have found that. We also had a potential for an internal fault on a generator that we found through analytics. So even though the customer may not be able to participate in real-time pricing right now, I think analytics are going to help us drive prices down through pass-through costs that we have, or just not having to spend capital costs, which is we earn a rate of return on. So the real-time analytics that we do, if we can do them well and effectively and efficiently, should translate into, at the end of the day, the customer seeing either lower rates, better performance from the system, not having as many outages.
I'd say you almost, our view, I think, is that you need to let the market decide on the pricing matter, at least. And I'd say some customers are going to want one thing and other customers are going to want another thing, and putting real-time capabilities in place is table stakes to ever be able to figure it out, like what the value and what the costs are, on a time-sensitive basis. So, and like you as a customer are going to have to decide: do you want your bill to be the same every month? Do you want your rate to be the same every month? Do you want to be totally exposed to market prices? And I think we need to let the retail market decide what that should look like, and let them try things out and see what people want.
So Frankie, I know you guys, I believe, are in the midst of a very strong a very strong change in load curves within SMUD. And pricing has been one of the major efforts you guys have gone to. You've got to have a lot of comments on this.
Yeah, and opinions. We've done some pretty cool pricing pilots that are driving our TOU design, but there are a lot of other things that are going to drive the TOU design, distributed generation, so on, what will happen in wholesale markets. I think that a customer, especially, what customer is really walking up to their washing machine going, oh, it's 49 cents right now, I better not run it. I don't think so. I think that the need for customers to see pricing is going to be a very unique group of customers that where energy is obviously a huge part of their cost structure, and they're willing to put resources into that. I think it's going to be more where a customer says, under these conditions, give me this price. Under these conditions, operate me this way. They might even give over control, depending on the industry. At the residential side, it'd definitely be even cruder than that, I think. So we've found that customers will change behavior based on price signals, but it won't be that they're getting it on their phone. They will get an alert, but it'll be 24 hours ahead. Here's the conditions that are going to happen tomorrow, and they will adjust. And we found that, we think over the residential base, we could get as much as 100 megawatts out of that over the next 3 to 5 years. So we're very confident on that. We're putting a lot of work into the pricing side as well as the more hardware solutions on DR. But I'm a skeptic when it comes to regular consumers or even most businesses caring about real-time pricing. I think if you mean by real-time pricing that it's set up in a structure, yes, but I don't think there's anybody watching their phone for an alert from SMUD on, hey, you went from 30 cents to 70, switch everything off and kick the customers out.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, it's been very interesting because when I've heard those discussions come up from people that aren't necessarily in the customer service group, when there's somebody overarching, it seems like real-time pricing hasn't been a major focus unless there is a major ramping issue or there's some planning issue where 3-4 years down the line they're expecting a tremendous change in load curves overall. When you look at Con Ed, for instance, they recently they focused on how can we take a particular region that would require a $1 billion substation, and how can we put resources that we can control in real time.
Yeah.
But instead of having it be a real-time price, it'd be they would control those resources
Right.
and coordinate them. So, Nick, are you wanting to?
Yeah, well, one
jump
thought
in?
on real-time pricing, I think it's a bit of a red herring because I think I probably would never, even as a total energy geek, I would probably never go on and figure out oh, it's 14 cents now. Maybe I could wait and it's going to be 8 cents, and then I'll do the laundry. But I think it is a conduit to something bigger, which is the ability for customers to create shortcuts for themselves as to how they do use energy. So, I mean, I imagine a world in the future where there are 2 different buttons on the laundry machine. 1, wait until it's cheap, or 2, go now.
Right.
And I can hit the wait until it's cheap button and let it do the thinking for me, because I don't want to go on the website and look up and figure out how much energy is right now and whether it makes sense to wait a minute or.
Yeah. And it's been, the example I'd bring up, and I've spoken with SDG&E before, one of the things that they were looking at regarding pricing was it's an incentive to change how you deploy. Potentially a residential customer might face their solar panel west instead of south. Things like that, there is that opportunity, but it's an indirect signal for a planning thing that's multiple years down the line. It becomes very complex and a related problem.
I think if I could add just, if you think, we tend to use analogies like, well, let's do what the airlines do, congestion pricing on Monday and Fridays, and people already understand that, but that doesn't mean they're happy about it. And then we see the exercises the telecom industry went through, and I don't know who liked free nights and weekends, because that just meant it was really expensive at other times. So I'm worried about it, even though we're going to time of use. All of our research says we can do this and do it well. The problem is if the curves change around in the middle of that, and you say, well, we wanted you to behave this way here. No, we want you to behave the same way, but it's over here, then it's over here. We're going to really have to think that out, because I don't think consumers will accept that.
Yeah. We got a question over there.
Hi, Craig Lewis with the Clean Coalition. Fascinating panel. Thank you all very much. Jason, you hinted at the use of advanced inverter functionality in Duke service territory, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you compensate for that. All the work that the Clean Coalition has done shows that advanced inverter functionality is low-hanging fruit for providing distributed reactive power. It's really valuable. But how do you actually compensate for that? The inverter gets a little extra wear and tear. There's some efficiency hit of about 5% if you're pulling off the AC side of the inverter. You might have some curtailment on whatever the generation source is if you're at the operating capacity of the inverter. So could you just talk a little bit about how you've thought through the kind of monetization and whether that's different if the utility owns it versus if it's behind the meter?
Sure, it's a good question. And actually it's also not only who owns it, but it's how big. So, for the larger scale systems, we're already, the utility would rather own the megawatt and above. But even when you start thinking about rooftop solar, there is starting to be advances in technologies in low voltage power electronics that we're piloting right now to where we have a DC bus capability and we can potentially become the inverter for the customer, which would mean that the customer would not have to have the expense of buying the inverter. So there's a proposition for the customer at that point. We could potentially serve a DC load at the house. So we're working through the issues right now. Do I have a complete business case for it? No. But we're looking right now and seeing, is this something that we could potentially offer in the future to where we can actually speed the adoption of distributed energy resources at residential instead of impeding them. So we believe the technology is advanced to a place to where we're going to be able to do it. It's really now a business function. Can we economically do it?
I think we got one up here in the front. We got time for probably 2 more quick questions or 1 long one.
Hi, this is Matt Dusterberg from Home Connect. Based on what you guys have said so far, it sounds like there's a belief that customers don't really respond to price, or maybe not. Are there other areas that you're providing for customers to get them more engaged, to get them to look at energy more than 6 to 9 minutes a year?
Yeah, I can answer that. Well, no, I think customers do react to price. I don't think they react to price in real time. I think if they know, here's the behavior that I can control. So to answer your question, you have to educate customers on this through, there's several vendors here today. Opar spoke earlier, and David from Pulse spoke earlier. Engaging customers through just understanding their energy uses, providing these tools to them. It's expensive to provide those, and it's hard to turn around and say, what's the return on those? You should try that internally in a company. It's hard to say, yeah, this gets you this back in this many years. So customers understanding what the price is made of. I don't know if the customers will ever appreciate the grid. That might be a stretch. I mean, this is a product probably that most consumers don't understand at all. They know what it does, but they don't understand what's behind it and what controls it. And I don't know if they need to. So us, along with many utilities, are educating customers through the energy analysis, bill analysis, what's made up in the bill, what you can control, demand response. They're going to need to have to understand that, whether it's pricing or whether it's hardware. You know, the old DR was turn off your air conditioner for 4 hours and make you sweat. I mean, that's not something you really want to be proud of in a company. But there are other ways to do this where it's no change whatsoever, but in the aggregate, it's great for our consumers. So we're a not-for-profit. We're controlled by a 7-member board. We're not part of the CPUC. So we have a lot of local control, and there's a real focus on educating the customers. But it's a challenge, you know, for them to care about the utility when it's a very small part of their wallet. You know, the cell phone bill is larger in our case, in most cases. So that's the challenge.
And I would say from our perspective, we have some of the lowest rates in the Southeast, so our customers are not as generally driven by price, but what they are driven by is, you know, starting more and more, where's my power coming from? Are you looking to become greener? And 2, how can you make my interaction with you easier? So we're working on social media extremely hard. We're offering energy efficiency credits. It's a lot of the things that we've done in the past, but now we're highlighting them because they've become more important to our customer base.
And for us, it's a lot about the services around and framing the value, because I think I can prove to myself that people do care, because when the power goes out, people, like, the economy stops and people go nuts. But you know, that to me is evidence enough that people care. We haven't figured out, like, how do we make that manifest itself in a value proposition to customers through those services. So we're trying a lot of different things. I'm happy to talk about some of those offline, but I know people care. Like, they have to care. But it's really, how do you wrap services around that people care about it at a higher level?
Yeah, and I think I've seen some of the most interesting stuff from, Electric Power Board in Chattanooga has a lot of water heater pumps, or not water heater pumps, groundwater heat pumps, sorry. And most of their customers have backup heating systems, and they're able to pinpoint within, a day that your electricity usage has jumped by 50%, and you probably have a failure. Now it's not even just providing that value, it's also saying, I'm not creepily staring at everything you do in your house, and making sure that the customers are comfortable with that type of service. So there's definitely concerns around the customer service side, because those possibilities are there with smart meters today. It's just a matter of, is that something of value, and can you make it seem like you're helping, not stalking? So with that, I think we're just finishing up. Rick, if you want to take a just finishing up. We're going to be switching out over the next couple minutes, so feel free to stay in your seats.